Reba McEntire walked on to the Today Show set that morning with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades navigating the unpredictable waters of the entertainment industry. The bright studio lights reflected off the polished surfaces, bouncing across cameras, monitors, and meticulously arranged furniture. For over 40 years, she had walked into countless studios, countless arenas, and countless stages, yet something about this morning felt different, an almost imperceptible tension that seemed to hum just beneath the surface. The makeup artists exchanged nervous glances as they applied the final touches. A stylist adjusted her hair one last time, whispering words of encouragement. Even the production assistants, usually focused on their tasks, darted glances at Reba, as if anticipating something they could not yet name. The energy was off. She could feel it immediately. The kind of subtle unease that only professionals who had experienced both applause and criticism in equal measure could detect. Yet Reba, ever the consummate professional, ignored it, or at least she did her best. Her focus was her music. Today was about her new album, about the connection she still felt with her fans, about sharing stories that mattered. She carried herself with the grace and warmth that had become her hallmark over decades, and her smile, genuine and unwavering, reached her eyes in a way that immediately set those around her at ease. Across from her, Savannah Guthrie adjusted her papers on the desk. Flanked by Hoda Khatib and Craig Melvin, Savannah sat with the air of someone who believed herself fully in command of the stage. Hode's excitement was palpable, tempered by the instinctive caution that comes with experience. She knew live television was a delicate dance, and some moments could spiral unexpectedly. Craig, eyes scanning his notes, looked ready to intervene if necessary, but neither could predict how quickly the tone would shift. The cameras rolled. The bright red "On Air" sign illuminated the set, and millions of viewers at home were settling into their morning routines, coffee in hand, expecting the usual cheerful banter, maybe a laugh or two, a preview of the day's news, and a few notes about Reba's upcoming album. What they got instead would become a moment replayed endlessly across news segments, talk shows, and social media. An unforgettable lesson in self-respect and the fine line between tough questions and outright cruelty. Savannah started with what seemed on the surface like a compliment. Her words, though, carried a hidden edge, a subtle barb disguised as praise. "Well, Reba, it is so nice to have you here. You know, for someone who has been around as long as you have, you still manage to stay somewhat relevant. That must feel good." The words landed like a feather, but the implication was sharper than anyone in the room expected. Hoda shifted uneasily. Craig's gaze fell to his notes, and Reba's smile, while perfect on the surface, revealed the tiniest flicker of recognition in her eyes. She knew the kind of game being played. "Well, thank you, Savannah," Reba replied smoothly, her voice calm, melodic, yet carrying a quiet steel. "I think music is timeless, and when you pour your heart into what you do, people respond to that. It does not matter if you have been doing it for 40 years or 4. Good music is good music." Savannah leaned back slightly, her expression smug, as if a trap had been sprung and she were waiting for her opponent to falter. Right, but let's be honest," she said, her tone dripping with the subtle condescension that only experience and confidence bordering on arrogance can deliver. "Country music has changed so much. The younger artists today are really pushing boundaries. Artists like Casey Musgraves, Maren Morris, they're bringing something fresh. Do you ever feel like maybe your sound is a little, I don't know, dated? Like it belongs to a different era?" At that moment, the studio air thickened. A camera operator coughed nervously. One of the producers pressed a hand to her forehead, anticipating the inevitable storm that would erupt. Reba's composure, however, remained intact. I've been very fortunate to have over 35 #1 singles throughout my career, and while I appreciate the charts, I've never made music just to chase a number. I make music that means something to me and to my fans. That has always been my priority. Success isn't just about hitting #1, it's about creating something lasting, something that touches people's lives. Craig exchanged a quick glance with Hoda, hoping this was not setting the tone for the entire segment. Savannah, however, seemed emboldened by the tension she had created. "Ah, so you're saying you've given up on trying to compete with the younger generation?" she pressed, leaning slightly, a faint, cruel smile on her lips. "You're content just being a legacy act?" Reba's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained calm. "I have never been in competition with anyone. Music is not a sport. It is art. It is expression. I am proud of the legacy I have built and the artists I have inspired. That means more to me than any chart position ever could." The subtle power dynamics in the room shifted. Craig interjected, protective and firm. "Savannah, come on. Reba is an icon. She has influenced countless artists. Her best days are still happening. Look at the tour she just announced. Every venue sold out in minutes. That does not happen to someone whose best days are behind them." Reba offered Craig a nod of appreciation, and Hoda smiled encouragingly, but Savannah pressed on, undeterred. "Sold out, yes, but to who exactly? People your age, I would imagine? Not exactly the demographic driving the industry anymore." The studio, though brightly lit and meticulously arranged, seemed to shrink around the tension that had silently crept in. Reba's calm exterior masked a storm of emotions: frustration at the insinuations, disbelief at the lack of respect, and a simmering sense of indignation at being treated as if her decades of experience meant nothing. She had faced critics before: harsh reviews, dismissive journalists, even public opinion swings. But this was different. This wasn't constructive criticism. This was an attempt to belittle, to undermine, to diminish a lifetime of work in a matter of seconds. Hoda, sensing the growing discomfort, leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but urgent. "I think what makes Reba so special is that she has evolved with the times while staying true to herself. That takes real talent. Not many artists can maintain relevance and authenticity for decades. Your new album has gotten amazing reviews, Reba. Critics are saying it is some of your best work." Reba's smile softened as she nodded toward Hoda. Gratitude washed over her, a reminder that not everyone in the studio was blind to the disrespect she was enduring. "Thank you, Hoda. Yes, this new project has been really special to me. We worked with some incredible songwriters, people who understand the power of storytelling. And I think the stories we tell are universal: love, loss, hope, resilience. Those themes never go out of style because they are part of the human experience." For a brief moment, it seemed as though calm might return. But Savannah leaned forward again, her voice sharp, cutting through the fragile moment of peace like a knife. Sure, but you have to admit, Reba, the music industry has kind of left traditional country behind. I mean, when was the last time you had a #1 hit? Genuinely curious, because the charts today look very different from when you were in your prime." Craig's hand twitched instinctively toward his notes, as if he could physically shield Reba from the words. Hoda's eyes widened, a silent plea forming in their depths, hoping that Savannah would relent. But Savannah, fueled by the discomfort she had provoked, pressed on with clinical precision, her tone almost surgical in its cruelty. Reba inhaled slowly, centering herself. Her years in the spotlight had taught her that reaction was a choice. She could snap, she could lose her composure, or she could respond with calm authority. She chose the latter. "Well, Savannah," she began, her voice smooth but firm, "I have been very fortunate to have over 35 #1 singles throughout my career, and while I appreciate the charts, I have never made music just to chase a number. I make music that means something to me and to my fans. That has always been my priority. Success is not just about hitting number one. It is about creating something lasting, something that touches people's lives. Savannah's lips curled slightly, as if savoring a taste of anticipated victory. So you're saying you've given up on trying to compete with the younger generation? You're content just being a legacy act? Craig leaned forward, his voice tight with protective frustration. Savannah, that is not fair. Reba has influenced countless artists, pioneered sound in country music, and continues to perform to sold-out venues. Her best days are not behind her. Reba's eyes met Craig's for a fleeting second, a silent acknowledgement of solidarity, before returning her gaze to Savannah. There was no malice, no anger, only clarity and authority. I appreciate Craig standing up for me, but I can speak for myself. Savannah, I have never played it safe. Every album I make is a risk. Every time I step on stage is a risk. Every time I put my heart into a song, I am risking rejection, criticism, failure. But I do it anyway, because I love what I do, because it matters. Not because I think my fans will buy anything I put out, but because I respect them enough to give them my best work every single time. Hoda's fingers twisted nervously in her lap. She could see the slow-building storm in Savannah's eyes, the shift from smug confidence to mild irritation as her control began to falter. See, that's what I find interesting, she continued, her voice tinged with mock concern. You keep talking about respect and love and giving your best, but at the end of the day, your sales numbers tell a different story. Your last album didn't even go gold, did it? When was the last time you went platinum? The words, though framed as curiosity, carried an unmistakable sting. Hoda gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth in disbelief. Craig's jaw clenched, but Reba did not flinch. Instead, she straightened in her chair, her hands gripping the armrests with deliberate control, a small flash of steel visible in her eyes. Savannah continued, pressing the point further. I'm just trying to understand the disconnect between how you see your career and what the actual numbers show. Reba's voice, calm yet carrying the weight of decades of experience and dignity, cut through the tension. Savannah, with all due respect, the measure of music is not a spreadsheet. Over 80 million records sold worldwide, 18 #1 albums, 41 #1 singles, 3 Grammy Awards, 17 American Music Awards, 9 People's Choice Awards, over 50 major industry recognitions, and a Kennedy Crest honor. Those are numbers, but the number that matters most to me, the millions of people whose lives my music has touched, that is the number I care about. That is the legacy I cherish. The microphone slipped from her collar intentionally and deliberately, a symbolic gesture of refusal to be diminished. Every eye in the studio turned toward her as she placed it on the table in front of her with quiet finality. Reba's movements were slow, deliberate, controlled. She was no longer merely defending herself, she was drawing a line. The room fell into a stunned silence. Even Savannah, who had spent the last few minutes wielding her questions like weapons, seemed momentarily disarmed. She opened her mouth, perhaps to argue, perhaps to assert dominance, but the words caught somewhere between her throat and the reality she was now facing. She had crossed a line. Reba stood slowly, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable but resolute. Savannah, with all due respect, I have been in this business longer than you have been alive. I have faced critics, setbacks, tragedies, and challenges of every kind, but I have never, not once in my entire career, been treated with such blatant, intentional disrespect by someone who is supposed to be a professional journalist. This is not journalism. This is not an interview. This is cruelty disguised as conversation, and I will not participate in it. Hoda's eyes glistened with tears, and Craig's body tensed, unsure if he should intervene physically or simply bear witness to this unprecedented moment. Savannah, sensing the tide had turned against her, attempted to regain control. "Oh, come on, sit down. Don't be so dramatic," she said, her voice attempting casual dismissal. "This is how interviews work in the real world. I push, you respond. That is good television." "No, Savannah. Good television is respectful dialogue. Good television elevates its guests. Good television asks tough questions with grace. You are not pushing me. You are trying to humiliate me. I have too much respect for myself and for my career to remain in this room while that continues." With that, she picked up her purse, her movements deliberate, her dignity intact. Craig and Hoda, though alarmed, remained silent, recognizing that the choice before Reba was her own. "Reba, please," Hoda whispered, her voice trembling, tears forming. "We do respect you. We are huge fans. Do not let this ruin what could have been a wonderful interview. Stay, please." Reba smiled at her, a sad but genuine smile, acknowledging the warmth but holding firm. "Hoda, you are a sweetheart, but as long as she continues treating guests this way, I cannot be here. I am truly sorry, but I am not sorry for standing up for myself." Savannah scoffed, arms crossed, her defenses rising, yet the confidence that had begun the segment had visibly cracked. "You are completely overreacting. I was just asking tough questions." Reba faced her one final time, her voice low, measured, but cutting through the tension like a blade. "Savannah, your job is to inform and entertain your audience, not belittle people. Respect is earned, not demanded, and right now, you have earned none of mine." The studio, frozen in silence, seemed to hold its breath as Reba walked toward the exit, every movement a testament to self-respect and decades of hard-won wisdom. She left the cameras rolling, leaving behind a moment that would be replayed endlessly, a lesson in dignity, power, and the importance of standing up for oneself.
As Reba McEntire's heels clicked against the polished studio floor, a strange silence enveloped Studio 1A. It wasn't the typical pause between segments. It was the kind of silence that leaves everyone frozen in place, unsure of whether to speak or simply bear witness to what had just transpired. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every measured step, every deliberate gesture of a woman who had, in less than half an hour, commanded respect not with volume, but with dignity, clarity, and unwavering self-awareness. Hoda's hands were still raised slightly, her usually calm expression replaced by a storm of emotions, shock, sadness, and protective concern all tangled together. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, to reassure Reba, but the words seemed inadequate in the wake of the moment's gravity. Craig, meanwhile, leaned back slightly, his arms crossed but his posture tense, the subtle twitch of his jaw betraying the frustration he felt at the entire encounter. Both had known live television was unpredictable, but nothing in their combined decades of experience had prepared them for a confrontation of this magnitude. Savannah remained frozen at the desk, the smug confidence of earlier replaced by an unfamiliar vulnerability. She opened her mouth, then closed it, as if the right words to regain control had evaporated into the studio's tense air. For the first time, she was confronted with the reality that authority behind a desk did not equate to moral or professional dominance. Behind the cameras, the production team exchanged anxious glances. The executive producer whispered hurriedly into her headset, coordinating a plan to cut to a commercial break, to transition to a segment that could diffuse the tension. But the damage had already been done. Viewers at home were witnessing what could only be described as a moment of unparalleled honesty and integrity on live television. The buzz on social media had already begun, with viewers live tweeting and posting clips even as the segment continued. Hoda finally found her voice, soft but firm, directed at Savannah. "Savannah, that wasn't heat, that was hostility. You were deliberately cruel. Reba McEntire has dedicated her life to her art and her fans. She does not deserve this." Craig stepped forward, his voice steady but sharp. "This wasn't an interview, it was an attack, and you need to understand that. Respect is not optional, it is essential, and right now it's glaringly absent from your conduct." Savannah's cheeks flushed, a combination of embarrassment and disbelief as she tried to argue her position. "I was doing my job. I asked questions viewers want answered. Public figures are supposed to handle criticism." Hoda shook her head slowly, her disappointment almost tangible. Those were not tough questions. They were personal attacks disguised as curiosity. There is a difference, and by now you should know that difference. The cameras cut to a commercial, but the chatter behind the scenes was relentless. Producers debated whether to re-record segments, to issue statements, to prepare damage control. But the truth was undeniable. Reba McEntire had left the set with her dignity intact, and no amount of crisis management could erase that. Backstage, Reba had retreated to a quiet hallway. Her mind was calm, her breathing measured. She had anticipated potential discomfort from interviews before, but she had never experienced such a calculated attempt to undermine her presence. Yet she found no anger lingering in her heart, only affirmation. Standing up for oneself, even in the public eye, was not an act of defiance, it was an act of principle. And in that moment, she felt the quiet power that comes from unwavering self-respect. Her assistant approached cautiously, concern written on their face. "Reba, are you okay? That was intense." Reba smiled, a mixture of exhaustion and quiet triumph. "I am more than okay. I'm relieved. Relieved that I didn't let someone else define my worth. Relieved that I stayed true to myself. That's more important than any ratings, any chart position, any compliment or insult. My fans know who I am. My music knows who I am, and that's enough." Meanwhile, across the media landscape, the moment was already exploding. Clips of Reba's walkout, her final statements, and Savannah's stunned silence were shared across social media platforms, news sites, and entertainment channels. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag Respect Reba. Hashtag Today's Show Drama. Hashtag Reba McEntire. Opinion pieces sprouted, dissecting the interview moment by moment, praising Reba's composure, critiquing Savannah's approach, and debating the ethics of tough questions versus personal attacks. Fans flooded Twitter with messages of support, thousands of comments, shares, and posts celebrating Reba's courage. Many wrote personal stories of how her music had helped them through difficult times, and how watching her stand up to disrespect in real time felt empowering. Teenagers, parents, and even grandparents expressed their admiration. It was a moment that transcended generations, much like Reba herself. In the following days, talk shows, podcasts, and news outlets analyzed the event frame by frame. Media analysts debated the line between journalistic inquiry and cruelty, often returning to Reba's calm, dignified responses as a benchmark for professionalism and grace. Industry colleagues, many of whom had experienced similar treatment but lacked the platform to respond, expressed both solidarity and admiration. Some artists sent private messages, others public statements, all recognizing the courage it took to leave a high-profile interview on principle. Savannah, on the other hand, faced an internal reckoning. Calls from producers and executives emphasized the negative public reaction, the trending hashtags, and the professional criticism that had begun to mount. She was confronted with the truth that the cameras had not captured. Authority does not equate to respect. And in the world of live media, moments of cruelty, however subtle, are not easily forgiven. Hoda and Craig, though supportive, also had to process the event. They reflected on the delicate balance of live television, the responsibility of hosts to their guests, and the ethical obligations of journalists. For them, the incident became a cautionary tale and a reminder of why professionalism, empathy, and respect are non-negotiable. For Reba, the aftermath was both affirming and reflective. She spent the day speaking to her team, reflecting on decades of career decisions, the relationships she had nurtured, and the obstacles she had overcome. She considered the irony that even in confrontation, she had communicated the very essence of her career: authenticity, courage, and connection. Later that evening, sitting quietly in her home studio, Reba reflected on the power of music, legacy, and self-respect. She thought about the fans who had grown up with her songs, the young listeners discovering her music for the first time, and the timeless truth that art is not measured by charts alone. She strummed a gentle chord on her guitar, feeling the resonance as much in her heart as in the room. Music, she realized, was always about connection, and in standing up for herself, she had connected in a way deeper than any album or tour ever could. Across the country, viewers who had watched the interview replayed the moment, shared clips, and discussed it with friends, family, and online communities. Reba McEntire's name trended not for controversy, but for courage. The discussion shifted from critique of ratings to appreciation of integrity. Even industry executives, who might normally focus on numbers, acknowledged the rare and powerful example Reba had set. The walkout became symbolic, a modern lesson in dignity, self-respect, and the power of standing firm. It was no longer just about one interview. It was about every artist, every professional, and every individual who has ever been challenged or belittled in a situation where they expected respect.
The morning after the Today Show incident, the entertainment industry woke up to a media storm. Headlines screamed across digital platforms, each more sensational than the last. Country legend walks out of Today Show. Savannah Guthrie faces backlash after on-air confrontation. Reba McEntire stands her ground, a lesson in respect. Reba's social media accounts were flooded, not with criticism, but with gratitude, admiration, and shared personal stories. Fans recounted how her songs had guided them through heartbreak, celebrated their milestones, or simply provided solace during lonely nights. Across generations, people expressed awe at the grace and composure with which she had handled the situation. It was clear Reba's influence extended far beyond record sales or award counts. She had touched lives, and now, in this defining public moment, she had demonstrated a courage that mirrored the very themes in her music: resilience, strength, and dignity. Industry insiders weighed in quickly. Veteran producers and journalists praised Reba's poise, pointing out that standing up to a host in the glare of live television required not only confidence, but strategic calm. It's rare to see someone command respect without raising their voice or resorting to theatrics, noted one media analyst on a morning news program. Reba McEntire turned what could have been an embarrassing situation into a powerful statement about integrity and self-worth. In Nashville, her peers in the music community shared supportive messages. Country artists, past collaborators, and even contemporary musicians acknowledged the impact of her actions. Reba showed what real leadership looks like, tweeted one young country singer. She didn't just walk out, she taught everyone watching what respect and dignity mean. The ripple effect reached beyond the music industry. Talk shows, podcasts, and social commentary programs replayed the clip repeatedly, analyzing Reba's measured responses and Savannah's miscalculated aggressiveness. Media ethics professors discussed the incident in interviews, framing it as a study in the difference between challenging questions and personal attacks. The lesson was clear: the platform one occupies does not grant the right to humiliate others. Meanwhile, Savannah Guthrie faced an uncomfortable reality check. Executives at the network privately expressed concern about the negative public reaction and the perception of professionalism under scrutiny. Calls came in from PR teams urging a measured response, but the damage was evident. Clips of her condescending tone and dismissive body language were being shared globally, often juxtaposed with Reba's poised and resolute responses. Savannah's confidence, once unshakable in the studio, now faced an unfamiliar vulnerability. The situation forced introspection, professional and personal. It was not enough to rely on authority behind a desk. Respect and credibility needed to be earned, not assumed. Even within the network, discussions ensued about how interviews were conducted. Producers revisited guidelines for guest interactions, ensuring that questions could challenge without disparaging. The incident became a benchmark case for training new hosts and journalists, an enduring reminder that professionalism, empathy, and respect were not optional in broadcasting. In the days that followed, Reba reflected on the event with her team, her friends, and her family. She recognized that while the moment had been tense and emotionally taxing, it had also provided an opportunity to reinforce her personal and professional principles. She drafted a heartfelt message for her fans, a note of gratitude for their unwavering support, and a gentle reminder that self-respect was paramount regardless of circumstance. Her message resonated widely, earning praise from fans, fellow musicians, and industry professionals alike. It underscored a timeless truth: authenticity, integrity, and courage are far more lasting than fleeting chart numbers or social approval. Reba had not only defended herself, she had reinforced the very values that had defined her career for decades. The legacy of the incident extended beyond the immediate reactions. It sparked conversations about how media platforms interact with artists, the responsibilities of hosts toward guests, and the subtle ways disrespect can manifest under the guise of inquiry. Reba's stance became a rallying point for artists and professionals in multiple industries, reinforcing the idea that one's voice, experience, and dignity cannot and should not be undermined by others' attempts of dominance. Months later, the story remained relevant. Retrospectives, documentaries, and interviews revisited the day in Studio 1A, analyzing Reba's words and actions. She became a symbol of measured strength, the woman who refused to be belittled, who walked away from disrespect with her dignity intact, and who reminded the world that legacy is defined not just by accomplishments, but the courage to stand for one's principles. For Reba herself, the episode became more than just an isolated incident. It was a reaffirmation of the path she had chosen decades ago, the path of authenticity, resilience, and purposeful artistry. It reminded her why she had spent a lifetime creating music, telling stories, and connecting with people across generations. And quietly, it also reminded her that the power of her voice extended beyond songs. It extended to her ability to assert respect and demand humanity in every space she occupied.
Weeks turned into months, and the Today Show incident became more than just a viral moment. It became a case study in professional ethics, media conduct, and personal integrity. Reba McEntire's exit was dissected repeatedly in interviews, panels, and online discussions. She became the benchmark for handling disrespect with grace and firmness, a standard cited by journalists, talk show hosts, and educators alike. For Reba, the incident was a reaffirmation of her career-long philosophy that music and life alike are about authenticity, connection, and respect. Sitting in her home studio one quiet evening, she reflected on the chain of events, the questions, the condescension, the calculated jabs. They had all been moments she could have reacted to with anger, frustration, or even regret, but she hadn't. She had remained composed, assertive, and most importantly, true to herself. That truth, she realized, resonated far more deeply than any fleeting television moment or headline ever could. Her fans, who had immediately rallied behind her, continued to show their support. Letters poured in, social media mentions surged, and streaming numbers climbed, not because of controversy, but because people admired her integrity. Young listeners shared their stories of discovering her music for the first time, inspired not only by her songs, but by the courage she displayed in standing up to disrespect. For them, Reba McEntire was more than an icon. She was a role model, a symbol of what it means to navigate life and career with dignity.
Meanwhile, Savannah Guthrie's professional trajectory faced a complex reckoning. Internally, executives and producers reflected on the incident with a mixture of concern and relief. Concern for the public backlash and relief that the conversation sparked wider discourse on ethical interviewing practices. Savannah herself reportedly underwent media coaching and internal reflection, grappling with the consequences of her actions. Publicly, she attempted measured statements, emphasizing her intent to ask challenging questions, while avoiding acknowledgement of the personal nature of her comments. Critics and media commentators, however, continued to highlight the disparity between her intentions and the effect her questions had, underscoring a critical lesson: authority does not absolve one from accountability. For the broader industry, the incident sparked introspection. Networks revisited policies on interviewing, emphasizing respect, preparation, and sensitivity. Workshops were developed to train hosts in how to challenge without belittling, how to probe without attacking, and how to maintain professionalism even when provoked. Reba McEntire's example became central to these discussions, her actions cited as a gold standard for asserting dignity in the face of adversity. On a personal level, Reba embraced the moment as a reminder of why she had spent decades cultivating her career with authenticity and heart. Awards, accolades, and chart positions were never her sole measure of success. Her true measure had always been connection, touching lives, inspiring other artists, and creating music that resonated across generations. The Today Show incident reaffirmed that principle. Even in confrontation, her legacy was defined not by conflict, but by the unwavering commitment to her values. Months later, Reba returned to touring and studio work with renewed energy and clarity. Fans flocked to concerts in record numbers, energized not only by the music, but by the symbolic power of her integrity. Each song performed carried with it the weight of her experience, her courage, and her enduring commitment to artistry over approval. Interviews following the tour carefully balanced promotion with reflection, with Reba often using moments to gently emphasize the importance of respect, professionalism, and self-worth. In retrospective articles and interviews, Reba reflected on the incident with humility and insight. It wasn't about the confrontation, she explained in one in-depth profile. It was about self-respect, about understanding that how we treat each other, especially in moments where one person holds more power or influence, matters. If we lose that, we lose more than just a moment of television. We lose our humanity. Her fans, who collectively faced a moment of reckoning. Her colleagues, younger artists, and fans often cited the Today Show walkout as a defining moment. It was replayed in media classes, discussed in panel discussions, and celebrated as a rare example of courage in the entertainment industry. Reba McEntire had not only protected her dignity in a single incident, she had provided a lasting lesson in professionalism, ethics, and human decency. In the end, the episode reinforced an enduring truth. Legacy is not only built through achievements, awards, or chart-topping hits. Legacy is built through character, the courage to stand for oneself and others, and the ability to navigate challenges with grace and integrity. Reba McEntire, with every step she took off the Today Show set, reminded the world that true respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned and defended. And in defending hers, she had done more than walk away from a difficult interview. She had cemented her place, not just as a country music legend, but as an enduring example of dignity, courage, and unshakable principle.